The worst drug disaster in history would spread through more than 46 countries and produce up to 20,000 badly deformed babies worldwide. But historians today single out one birth in 1961 that changed the course of history. In Hamburg, Germany, Linda Schulte-Hillen, aged 23, gave birth to her first child. Her husband wasn't with her at the time.
And it was quiet there. And then I lay back and was relaxed, and somebody whispered into my ear, "Is your husband not all right?" And I was here, wide awake, and I said, what has happened to my baby? Is anything wrong? Yeah, she said, just, let's say, without any emotion. Yeah, he's just got short arms. And I, like a child would have asked possibly, I said, "And aren't they growing anymore?" And she said, "This can't grow. This will be like it is now." And then I felt like I was beaten to death.
A doctor gave the first-time mothers some friendly advice.
Just get another child. Like, forget about him, you know? Throw him away, forget about him.
Shortly afterwards, Linda's husband arrived and gave her some bad news he'd been keeping from her. 6 weeks earlier, his sister had given birth to a baby with similar deformities.
It looks alike, like our child. There must be something that is the same origin, the same difficulty, the same problem in the background. And we'll find it, and we'll search, and we won't stop until we've found.
The epidemic of deformed babies began 5.5 years earlier, on Christmas Day, 1956, with the birth of the first victim. In the small town of Aachen, Germany, a mother had taken a new drug called Thalidomide, being developed by a local drug company, Chemie Grünenthal. Her husband, like other Grünenthal employees, had taken home a sample, which he gave to his pregnant wife. The baby would be the first of 6 thalidomide babies, possibly more, born to Grünenthal workers in the years ahead. But the company ignored the early warning signals in their midst.
None of that spurred Grünenthal to any action. Grünenthal didn't investigate, didn't talk to the mum, didn't go to the hospital, didn't look at the medical records, didn't contact experts. There were multiple opportunities for Grünenthal to cut the whole disaster short. None of them were taken.
9 months after the first deformed baby was born, Grünenthal launched thalidomide onto the German market under the brand name Contergan. Grünenthal's aggressive sales force, whose motto was "succeed at any cost," continued to promote the drug. Contergan, they claimed, was a safe sedative, especially for pregnant women suffering from morning sickness. Sales zoomed, and thalidomide became the second best-selling drug next to aspirin. But Linda Schulte-Hillen and her husband, Karl Hermann, were determined to find out what caused their son's short arms. Months later, they were no closer to finding an answer.
I know my husband had times when he said, "We won't make it. I think we have to give up." And I said, "And we are not giving up."
Her husband soon contacted a professor of obstetrics, Dr. Widukind Lenz, who had received a few reports of deformed babies.
My father and Professor Lenz, they traveled Germany in their old Volkswagen, and they went from one small village to another and asked, are there any children with short legs or short arms born? And those kids were hidden away at that time in the small villages. And he asked in restaurants and bars and at the local police office, and everybody said, no, not in our town. And then he showed a picture of me and said, this is my boy, and can I please repeat my question? And then they said, well, at the end of the road, there has been a very sad incident. And then he went there and rang the door and showed, the first thing he did was showing the picture of me and said, this is my son. Do you also have a kid like this? And the people burst in tears, and children, thalidomide children, were pulled to the day of light, literally.
In England, Thalidomide was being sold under the brand name Distaval by the country's largest liquor manufacturer, the Distillers Company. As in Germany, distillers had received reports of deformed babies, but had been assured by Grünenthal that the drug was completely safe. Louise Mason was one of 530 thalidomide babies born in England over a 6.5-year period. Louise only learned about the circumstances of her birth by reading her father's best-selling autobiography.
I hadn't got any arms and I hadn't got any legs. And my dad said it was like little flower buds, you know, from my arms and from my legs. My dad had a look at me and he said, "My God, you're not going to let this baby live?" And they said, yes. My mum was only 21 and she was advised by doctors to put me away and concentrate on having another family.
After 11 days in hospital, her parents took Louise to an institution for handicapped children, where she would spend the next 18 years of her life. But Louise was fortunate. Her father had not asked another doctor to end her life.
It is unquestionable that midwives and doctors were killing disabled children in the hospitals, in the delivery rooms, on a large scale, in Britain, in Germany, and if they're probably everywhere else.
In Canada, another armless baby was spared by a poor Ukrainian family in rural Saskatchewan. Years later, Alvin Law learned how horrified his natural parents were when he was born.
Ultimately, it was the paternal grandmother who didn't want to have anything to do with this. She said, "You're not going to bring that devil baby home with you. He's deformed because of a curse."
The armless baby wasn't taken home after doctors warned he would never lead a normal life. But after 6 weeks, an elderly couple, Jack and Hilda Law, who had already raised their own children, volunteered as foster parents and got their first look at Alvin.
And I took one look and I thought, no wonder nobody wanted him. And the next time I went to see him, of course, they had him bathed and dressed, and he didn't look too bad at all.
Well, I wasn't in favor of taking him at all. No way. We'd raised our family, and that was it. But it was a baby with nobody wanted him, so what are you going to do? Turned out okay.
My life story shifted the moment that Sophie and Peter, my birth father, gave me up. That is a profound chapter shift in my life. Because I went to live with the Laws, my life became this life.
In Cincinnati, Ohio, a deeply religious Roman Catholic couple with 6 children were expecting another normal birth.
My mother's story is that when I was born, they were not at all prepared. The doctor said, "Joy, your baby doesn't have any legs." So she says that she took the baby, me, and she said, "Well, Eileen is my 4-leaf clover." I have a sibling who told me that my father cried and that when he came home, he handed me to my siblings and everyone got very upset and they said, "Take it away." Someone ripped off the blankets and said, "That's not a baby," or something to that effect. "That's not our sister." That was what I was told as a young child. Painful.
Eileen Cronin was one of several thalidomide babies born in Cincinnati, where an American drug company, Richardson Merrill, had their headquarters. Like the German drug company, Merrill promoted the drug as completely safe, even during pregnancy. Like Grünenthal, Merrill had no evidence to back this up. Merrill applied to the Federal Drug Administration in 1960 for approval to bring thalidomide onto the American market and was allowed to conduct clinical trials on patients across the country.
Now, it wasn't a clinical trial at all. What it was a marketing campaign trumped up to look like a clinical trial.
Michael Magazanik is an Australian lawyer and former investigative reporter who spent years researching the thalidomide disaster.
What Merrill wanted to do was to familiarise doctors with their drug so that once they got approval, they would have doctors all ready to go, thrilled with the drug, ready to prescribe it like crazy.
Thalidomide was now being sold in close to 50 countries worldwide. In 1961, in Australia, Dr. William McBride delivered 3 thalidomide babies in a few months. He alerted distillers, the British distributor of thalidomide, but they claimed they never received his warnings, and pregnant mothers like Wendy Rowe continued to take thalidomide for morning sickness. But when her daughter, Lynette, was born, Wendy immediately knew something was wrong.
When she was born, there was just deadly silence in the room, and I just knew that something must be wrong, and nobody said a word. It was just loud silence. And anyway, finally they said to me that there was a problem and that Lynn had no arms and legs, and you know, and they gave it to me, and she doesn't look very different to what she does now. She had sticky up hair and the cutest little face. But it's just like, well, it was like a nightmare, I suppose, you know. But then when you looked at her and thought, well, you've got to love it. You can't do anything about it. But they said, we think she's got some brain damage, but we don't know what extent. And I just looked at her and I thought, here's this little thing, no arms and legs, and if she's got brain damage as well, what hope have you got? They told me that I should put her in a home, that she would be dead in 6 months. We left her there for a week while we went away just to get our head around it all, and then came back to pick her up. And that was really hard, going back to the hospital to pick her up.
In Germany, Grünenthal's advertising campaign was paying huge dividends. The company's owner and executives were making fortunes overnight, especially Heinrich Muchter, Grünenthal's research director. During the war, Muchter served as a Nazi doctor developing vaccines which were tested on Jewish prisoners in the Buchenwald concentration camp, many of whom died. After the war, Muchter joined Grünenthal. 9 years later, he invented thalidomide and received a bonus for every thalidomide pill sold worldwide.
In Germany, where the pill sold at a rate of 15 million a month, 5,000 children have been born deformed. From Stolberg, Germany, Morley Safer reports.
In November of 1961, just 300 miles from here in Hamburg, Dr. Videkun Lenz, the director of human genetics at the University of Hamburg, found an astounding increase in the number of deformed babies. He deduced that Contergan, or thalidomide, was the cause.
Grünenthal sent out 66,000 letters to German doctors declaring their drug was safe. 66,000 letters to German doctors. I mean, you know, that was a period where they'd been told that their drug was likely responsible for an epidemic of malformations and deaths, and they're telling doctors their drug is safe.
And it really wasn't until the press got hold of it and they knew it was going to go public that they finally backed off and agreed.
On November 28, 1961, a day after the thalidomide scandal made headlines in West Germany, Grünenthal announced it was withdrawing the drug from the market.
Even if as late as the spring of 1961 they had taken the drug off the market then, they would have spared half the babies.
In England, Louise Mason didn't see her parents and 3 siblings for months at a time.
I was left alone most of the time. My parents had other children. There's no way that they could leave them with my nan because my grandpa was ill. So they just stopped coming. I went home 3 weeks a year for a week. 1 week in the summer, 1 week at Christmas, and 1 week at Easter. Every holiday was like getting to know your brothers and sisters again.
Alvin Law's parents decided the best way to get their armless son to cope with life was to turn his toes into fingers. For hours, Alvin was given manual tasks to perform with his feet.
Now, granted, having no arms isn't exactly a rather simple disability. It's a very complicated disability. And I'd be lying if I didn't say it was a lot of work. A lot of work. A lot of time spent by myself, being very lonely, being very afraid, being very frustrated. But I think it was the character that was built by my parents, especially by my parents, that allowed me to not really think that I was all that different.
It's not an easy thing to get dressed, but again, it goes back to the basic theory of my life, and that is, do I have someone look after me, or do I look after myself? But more than anything, I think it's a mindset, you know, that, okay, there's a lot of people in our world that have way bigger problems than I have, so that I have to spend a little extra effort putting my clothes on, so what? The moment I started using my toes and my feet and my legs was the same moment I ceased to have a disability.
In the United States, there would have been thousands of thalidomide babies like Alvin Law, except for the actions of one woman. Dr. Frances Kelsey, a Canadian-born doctor and pharmacologist, had just joined the Federal Drug Administration when she received an application to bring thalidomide onto the American market.
Here was a drug that looked like it should be no problem, but at the same time, there was just a feeling that there was something in the data or the absence of data that was a cause of concern.
The application came from Richardson Merrill, one of America's oldest drug companies, known years ago for its best-selling product, Vicks cough drops.
Merrill poured on the pressure. They contacted the FDA 50 times. They went behind her back to her superiors. They complained about her in writing. They threatened libel proceedings. They pushed and pushed and pushed, and she was resolute. She was unbelievably tough.
I know that we're all most indebted to Dr. Kelsey, the relationship, the hopes that all of us have for our children.
In August 1962, President John F. Kennedy awarded the highest civilian honor an American can receive to Dr. Frances Kelsey.
While Dr. Kelsey said, I need to know more, I want to have more, I demand to have more, the Canadian government simply approved it. And I believe that was below the standard of what should have been expected from an industrialized, first world country like very civilized Canada.
Thalidomide continued to be sold in Canada for 4 months after it was withdrawn from the German market. The Food and Drug Directorate in Ottawa issued no warnings to the public, while the drug remained on pharmacy shelves. Most thalidomiders don't use artificial limbs today, but Eileen Cronin is an exception. She wears artificial legs every day to get around.
I was born with both legs missing from the knees down. According to my mother, I did adapt to the legs pretty quickly. If you have, artificial legs, a lot of things go wrong. You've got to go around conducting your life, and yet, you've got a skin infection and you've got to put your leg on. What are you going to do? Me, I put the leg on, I go. That's not always the best thing to do, but that's what I do.
In Australia, artificial limbs proved to be useless and even dangerous for Lynette Rowe.
These legs were designed for Lynn to walk in, but they were terribly dangerous because every step she took, she had to rock from side to side. The least little thing on the path, she would just fall over, straight down.
Lynette required the full-time care of her devoted parents. For years, her mother's nightly routine was always the same.
Good morning. Good morning. And, getting up in the night and turning her and giving her a pan, and it's a constant thing that I talk to some young mothers sometimes and they say, oh, I've had to get up in the night. I said, I've been doing that for 52 years.
Have you had enough?
Thank you.
You sure? Okay.
In March 1967, the owner and 8 executives of Grünenthal, the German drug company, were charged with criminal negligence, premeditated bodily harm, and manslaughter. Among the defendants was Heinrich Muchter, the Nazi doctor who made a fortune inventing thalidomide.
One German historian has looked at a short list of Grünenthal staff from the early 60s, and he said it's absolutely astonishing that a small company should have such a concentration of convicted war criminals on its staff, unusual even by the standards of post-war Germany.
Another top Grünenthal executive was Otto Ambros, a Nazi war criminal known as the Devil's Chemist. Ambros was convicted of war crimes he committed at Auschwitz, for which he served 4 years in prison. But after the war, the chemist found no shortage of employers, including Dow Chemical, J. Peter Grace, and the U.S. Army's Chemical Corps, before he became chairman of Grünenthal's board of directors in 1971. The man who hired Nazi war criminals like Ambros and Muchter was Grünenthal owner Hermann Wirtz. Wirtz was a member of the local Nazi party in his hometown before the Second World War, a service for which he was handsomely rewarded by Adolf Hitler.
The Wirtz family companies had actually thrived during the war years because they'd had a contract from the German army to supply soap and detergents. They had been supplied with slave workers. They had been basically handed 2 companies on a plate that were both either Jewish-owned or Jewish-controlled.
Josef Neuberger was the personal lawyer for Grünenthal's owner, Hermann Wirtz. But in December 1966, Neuberger resigned suddenly and became justice minister in the province where the trial was being held.
Grünenthal's chief defense lawyer ended up with a government responsibility for overseeing the conduct of the trial. That kind of stinks. And one German observer of the day said, "This makes us look worse than a banana republic."
Away from the trial, a secret deal was worked out between Grünenthal's owner, Hermann Wirtz, and the provincial government. The secret deal was only revealed when the trial was dramatically stopped after 2.5 years. Under the deal, volumes of the prosecution's evidence would be sealed from public view. In return for having all the serious criminal charges against its owner and executives dropped, the company agreed to pay the victims lifetime pensions ranging from $30 to $140 a month, as well as small one-time payments. But in order to collect the money, the thalidomiders had to agree not to launch any further suits against Grünenthal.
So, taken as a whole, the trial was a glorious, if unlikely, triumph for Grünenthal. Grünenthal really escaped from the disaster relatively lightly, given the scale and the scope of the tragedy.
While Canada loudly celebrated its 100th birthday in 1967, the thalidomide families suffered in silence. A few parents had committed suicide, others became alcoholics, and some were having severe psychiatric problems. The thalidomide children were now school age, but the question that plagued medical and educational authorities was what type of school should they enter?
School says, wait, he's got no arms. He can't go to this school. We don't have such a thing as integration. Mom and Dad are going, what's integration? He's a kid. He needs to go to school. He needs to learn. He needs to be educated. He can write. He can read. What else do you need?
The school finally agreed to take Alvin. In England, 197 families of thalidomide children were suing Distillers, the British company which had distributed the drug. Distillers made a ridiculously low offer of compensation and warned that the money would be paid out only if all parents agreed to the lifetime deal. 5 families refused the offer. They were led by David Mason, a wealthy London art dealer and father of Louise.
Now, I came under tremendous pressure. I received threats on my life. I had a police guard for a period of time. I had anonymous phone calls. I had anonymous letters. I had, threats from parents.
Her father's well-publicized opposition to the compensation created problems for Louise at her care institution.
Up until then, I was sort of like one of the crowd, but after that, I was picked on And that's when I felt like I was alone amongst a crowd.
Louise escaped the hostility of her classmates when her father took her out to participate in publicity events for his campaign.
I was used as a poster girl, not only because I was his daughter, but because I had the extremes of the disability, and visually I had great impact.
David Mason's campaign succeeded in increasing by 6 times the drug company's original offer to the parents.
I did pay a heavy price personally, but if I hadn't have paid that price, the thalidomiders wouldn't have got the compensation when they got the compensation. So I think it was worth it.
The thalidomiders were becoming teenagers. Alvin Law thrived in school, and by the time he was a teenager, he seemed to fit right in.
As far as the whole scene of school has been, I think that's the most important part, is being accepted by people. If you're not accepted, it won't be worth anything.
It was about acceptance, totally. And it was about asking 2 or 3 girls out on dates, to which I heard, "Are you kidding?"
I wanted to date just like any 16-year-old, but I didn't have that good fortune. And of course, I used to blame it on the girls. And maybe it was partly them, but I know it was mostly me.
I thought that I was going to have to be a nun. I didn't think that I was going to go on dates. I didn't know what was going to happen. And that's not how it happened. I had a great high school run. I mean, you know, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of friends. I had too much fun. If you're like me and my friends, you drive around and you look for pools and you go skinny dipping. And that's what we did.
For most thalidomiders, getting behind the wheel of a car was the road to independence and freedom. Louise Mason was determined to drive, no matter how difficult it was for her just physically to get behind the wheel and do up her seatbelt.
Well, my driving instructor had never instructed a disabled person, let alone somebody who'd got no arms and legs. But the tests we took was exactly the same as everyone else. There was no difference. It came so natural because I've been driving electric wheelchairs for most of my life, and getting in a car was just a bigger wheelchair, really.
What thalidomiders didn't know was that the drug was still in circulation. Though Grünenthal had stopped producing the drug, thalidomide made an early comeback in the mid-60s when other suppliers began manufacturing it in India and some South American countries, where it had become the drug of choice for treating leprosy.
So at this point, I do want to introduce my good buddy, he's become a good buddy, Timmy. Come on now.
Alvin Law found himself in the public limelight when he became his province's spokesman for handicapped children.
I can be what I think I am, at least I think I can, if you let me.
Over the years, Alvin would make appearances on telethons across the country.
At least I think I can, I think I can.
I'm not better than other handicapped people, because I'm not a handicapped person. That's where people get it wrong, right? They look at Alvin Law and they think, God, it's tremendous how he can do things with his feet. Well, I suppose if you look at your feet, it's tremendous. But these are my feet. These are my hands, too. And I have been doing it forever. These are not tremendous feet. These are the only thing that I've got. So when I pick up a cup and I have a drink, you know, oh, wow, what a thrill. That's not what it is. That's how I do things, you know?
Life wasn't so kind for another thalidomide poster child. Louise Mason continued to endure bullying from other kids at her institution for the handicapped. But one day, when she was 13, she was raped by another student. Louise went to a nurse for help.
I was shaking, I was tearful, and they took my underwear off and saw blood. And I tried to explain to them what had happened. They did nothing. They did nothing at all.
Louise endured 5 more years of fear and loneliness before finally leaving the institution. Then, like any 18-year-old, Louise immediately started to enjoy the freedom and joys of college life.
I went to parties just for the sheer hell of going to the parties. I'd be absolutely cream crackered, but I'd still go because it was something that I shouldn't have done or wasn't allowed to do.
I went to the pub regularly, drank lots of beer regularly. I got into trouble there. You weren't supposed to have boys in your room, and I did. But I made it say I got to vice president of the student union and got well respected.
Unlike Louise Mason, who rarely saw her mother during childhood, Jan Schulte-Hillen formed a close bond with his mother from birth, and her unwavering support and encouragement were critical in his career decision.
She never lost hope. She said, everything you want to achieve in your life, you're going to achieve it. I have absolutely no doubt. And when I turned up with the idea that I wanted to be a doctor, everybody told me you should not. It's not a very good idea. You cannot do that. You will have severe problems. She said, son, do your own thing. If that's what you want to do, you're gonna manage.
Jan is now an emergency room doctor in Switzerland.
I don't consider my condition as a major issue. I mean, I'm not a thalidomide in first spot. I'm a man. I'm trying to be a good doctor. I'm trying to be a good husband. I'm a father. I'm a lover. And I have short arms, and that's it. And if people have problems accepting me or have problems to interact with me because I have short arms, it's their problem, it's not mine.
After years of waiting, suffering, and fighting for compensation, Canadian victims of thalidomide are finally getting the help they need from the federal government. Yesterday, the health minister said survivors of the drug will receive lifelong pensions.
Individuals can now start feeling comfortable about their future. They know they have an amount of money coming in every year that can support them and help them.
Hey, I don't know what your lives are like. Sometimes life can really be rough on people. I understand that. I get it. I've been in real life.
Alvin Law is a motivational speaker who's influenced audiences in North America and Australia with his message of hope, especially to more than 2 million youngsters who've heard his talk.
Speaking is the best thing that I could have ever decided to do. You're helping kids, and they need to have somebody come in and tell them that it's going to be okay. But I get such tremendous joy out of doing it. There is nothing in my life that makes me happier than speaking to kids. Nothing.
In college, Eileen Cronin fell in love with Andy, a graduate student in economics.
I was in love, very definitely at first sight. Although I already had a boyfriend.
You know, I immediately was drawn to her, her vivaciousness and intelligence and her wit.
We moved in together, and we got pregnant very quickly. Very quickly. I was racked with worry all my life about having a child because I didn't know for sure that my mother had taken thalidomide. I was kind of panicked. It started to settle in. Oh my God, I'm gonna have a baby. I don't even know if I can have a baby. I don't know if the baby's gonna have legs or not have legs or something else, but also literally I did not know how I was gonna carry a baby in my body. And so they did the ultrasound. The ultrasound technician zoomed in right away, found foot, 1 foot, blew it up, took a picture and wrote foot, and then other foot, hands, fingers, and I was crying, and all the interns started clapping. We knew that she would be okay.
When his first wife, Sandy, became pregnant, Alvin Law was terrified about what the future held.
When I saw him come out of there with 2 arms and 2 hands and 5 little fingers on each hand, I didn't care what brand he was at all. I didn't care if it was a she or a he or it didn't matter. And it was just the most tremendous feeling. It was my son.
You want to do it again? Okay, here we go. Can you throw it back?
I worried a lot about how I was going to play ball with him, and you don't need arms to be there. You don't need arms to listen. You don't need arms to be a father at all. And unfortunately, too many fathers that have arms don't realize that. Never forget that, and that's true. You just have to be there for him.
What's he over there far across the lake? What's he doing? That surprised me. The tears, I don't know, I'm not sad, I'm just, wow. He's big now. He was little then. Yeah, boy, I miss that little boy sometimes, but that's not how life works, right?
Louise Mason had been a single mother for 10 years when she received a Christmas card from an old boyfriend.
I'd heard that Louise hadn't been very well and sent her a Christmas card and come down and said hello, and I think the spark reignited is the best way to describe it.
He kissed me goodbye, and butterflies were... I was sort of floating on a cloud, and he told his wife that he was leaving. She helped him pack the car, and then he moved down here. We've been together since. And that was it.
It's really, really fascinating how we communicate to each other without even talking. So yeah, I think we were made for each other, to be honest. Yeah.
In 1997, the Thalidomide Victims Association of Canada faced an agonizing choice. A small American drug company, Celgene, wanted to bring thalidomide onto the market as a treatment for leprosy and cancer, but needed the approval of the Federal Drug Administration in Washington. Celgene sought the support of Canadian victims for its application.
If thalidomide can change for the better the life of a child with cancer, then let's produce it. And let's give it to these children, and let's make their lives better. And if it's because of the price that we had to pay, good, then maybe we can have some solace in knowing that it wasn't all in vain.
In July 1998, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration licensed a thalidomide-based drug, but imposed the tightest rules on its use for any drug in history. Officially, Celgene got FDA approval for thalidomide to treat lepers, a minuscule American market. But the drug company quickly began focusing on it as a treatment for multiple myeloma, a cancer of the blood cells, and got approval for that use in 2006. In Australia, Grünenthal and Diageo, the British company that bought Distillers, were co-defendants in a multi-million-dollar class action suit centered on the Lynette Rowe case.
Melbourne woman Lynette Rowe is suing the drugs manufacturer Grünenthal. The company wanted the case heard in Germany, where it's never successfully been sued. But the Victorian Supreme Court today dismissed that application.
This was an application by the company that made thalidomide, the worst drug in the history of medicine, to have an armless, legless woman who has no money and doesn't speak German, if she wishes to have her day in court, have to move to Germany for the next 5 years.
So we had Diageo and Grünenthal as our defendants. Grünenthal have this never give in, never admit a thing, never concede, fight to the bitter end attitude. Distillers or Diageo took a much more compassionate, sensible, we'd say, approach, which was once convinced of the strength of the claim, they settled with Lynn. Grünenthal didn't pay a cent.
We had to get up and face each day and every day and cope with the incredible damage that Grünenthal did to Lynn and our family.
The settlement amount was a multi-billion-dollar sum. It was a sum sufficient to provide Lynn with first-class care for the rest of her life. It really has dramatically transformed the Rowe's lives.
Grünenthal refused to pay a cent of the multi-million-dollar settlement, but 2 months later held a press conference so it could apologize to its victims for the first time in 50 years.
Darüber hinaus bitten wir Entschuldigung, dass wir fast 50 Jahre lang nicht den Weg zu Ihnen von Mensch zu Mensch gefunden haben. Stattdessen haben wir geschwiegen und das tut uns sehr leid. Wir bitten Sie innig, unsere lange Sprachlosigkeit als das Zeichen der stummen Erschütterung zu sehen, die Ihr Schicksal bei uns bewirkt hat.
Our family couldn't have gone into silent shock. We had to get up and face each day and every day and cope with the incredible damage the Grünenthal drug did to Lynn and our family.
Grünenthal is still a privately owned company. The Wirtz family owns it today, just as it did in 1960. It does not have shareholders demanding returns. The Wirtz family's personal fortune has been variously estimated at between 2 and 3 billion euros. It would not drive that family into penury or bankruptcy or poverty to loosen the purse strings and behave in a more generous fashion towards survivors.
Grünenthal no longer makes thalidomide and continues to deny most thalidomiders outside Germany any compensation. No survivors feel they have received an acceptable apology. Grünenthal refused to be interviewed for this film. Today, Celgene continues to prosper from the sale of its thalidomide-derived drugs to treat multiple myeloma. Prior to getting approval to bring its version of the drug back onto the market in 1998, the American drug company was valued at $100 million. Today, Celgene's value has soared to $100 billion. The original thalidomide drug is easy and cheap to manufacture and continues to be made and distributed by several drug companies and governments to treat leprosy. Unfortunately, it is mostly used in countries that often do not enforce rigorous controls and regulations. As a result, thalidomide-injured babies are still being born. Thalidomiders worldwide, buoyed by the success of the Lynette Rowe case, have renewed efforts to fight for compensation as they battle with the continuing side effects of thalidomide.